In today's video, we're going to be discussing all the latest NHL trade rumors, including the reports that indicate the Montreal Canadiens are not going to be offering an extension to Max Pacioretty and they're looking to trade him as soon as possible. We're also going to discuss the fact that Patrick Maroon has finally signed a contract and is going to be a member of the St. Louis Blues. We'll discuss all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, we have some new trade rumors to be discussing here today. Obviously, there's been some new reports out of Montreal. We have the Patrick Maroon signing, and I also want to discuss the Minnesota Wild, as there's been some speculation around that team as well, as they have some interesting RFAs heading to arbitration soon. Unless they get deals done ahead of time, they kind of might be forced here into making a trade. So I want to give my thoughts on who they might be looking to possibly move out here. Now, the Minnesota Wild have had some trade rumors linked to some specific players, but I'm going to give you my thoughts too on what I think likely could happen to kind of keep their RFAs in the fold here. Now, first of all, let's jump in here, talk about Patrick Maroon quickly, as he finally signed a contract with the St. Louis Blues on a one-year deal worth $1.7 million. Obviously, this is something that's been dragging on here for a number of days. He's really the only prominent name kind of left over from the batch of free agents entering July 1st. We've seen all kinds of other players come and go, get their contracts looked after, and this Maroon deal seemed to take a lot of time to get done. I mean, it's been reported for a number of days that he was likely going to St. Louis. There were some reports that maybe New Jersey was interested in retaining him after all. Maybe he'd go back to Edmonton. It was kind of up in the air. All we could really hear was that the Blues were interested. There were some other teams as well. Even the Coyotes were a team that I heard mentioned had made an offer to Maroon. Obviously, I can't verify that that's 100% true, but it was something that's been out there within the rumor world. So we'll see. At this point, it doesn't really matter anymore because it's he signed with St. Louis. But it looks as though he kind of took his time to decide where he thought he fit best, and I guess on a one-year deal, I guess he's kind of betting on himself that he's going to have a good year and be able to get a good extension here to remain in St. Louis for some time. I really thought Maroon, being a player who's been around for a little bit longer and has a decent amount of success in the past, would have had a longer-term contract, a little bit more job security, but apparently that was hard for him to come by, and he's taken a shorter-term deal to go home to St. Louis, where he's from, and be a member of the hometown St. Louis Blues. I know I've seen quotes from Patrick Maroon indicating that he's very pleased to be heading home to play for his hometown St. Louis Blues. He's been looking forward to wearing that blue note jersey since he's been a little kid watching hockey. He was one of the very few players to grow up in that part of the country in the U.S. here to actually make the NHL. It's not an area that's produced very many NHL players, so obviously, that's something he takes great pride in as well. So obviously, he's heading back to St. Louis. So they've made a lot of changes with the Blues so far. I mean, obviously, they signed Maroon, they signed Tyler Bozak, they traded for Ryan O'Reilly. They've had a lot of things going on here, and still this Blues team is going to look quite a bit different heading into next season. So obviously Patrick Maroon likely will get a lot of time within the top 6 forward group, or top 9 for sure. So this team should look different. I think he'll be a good fit there. If things get off to a pretty good start here with Patrick Maroon in the first half of the year, I would think leading towards the trade deadline, we very well could see an extension in place, depending on how things work out for Maroon in a Blues jersey. And he's going to be wearing the number 7 as well. That's already been announced earlier today once he met with the media. Jumping into the reports here regarding Max Pacioretty. Now, obviously, a lot of you may have seen some news break that there's been some reports out of Montreal indicating that the Montreal Canadiens are not going to be offering a contract extension to Max Pacioretty and that they were looking to trade him as soon as possible. Now, at this point in time, it's hard to confirm if that's 100% true or not. I mean, obviously, Pacioretty's been mentioned in trade rumors for the better part of a year. We've discussed it on here many times, as there's been different rumors floating around about where he may go, or does he want out? Do the Habs really want to trade him? Could he possibly stay? Obviously, he's the captain of the club. I think they need to make a decision here soon enough. It doesn't appear, though, that he's interested in staying if he's not going to be captain, so I think stripping him of the C and leaving him on the roster, I think, could make things really messy and uncomfortable for everybody. So I don't think that's going to happen. So if this report is true, then I would fully suspect that we will see Pacioretty get moved sooner than later, or at least sometime over the summer. Now, obviously, Montreal hasn't had the greatest record, in my opinion, in making trades here. Marc Bergevin hasn't done the greatest with his more recent deals. I'm still not the greatest fan of the Galchenyuk for Domi deal, but time will tell on that, where Domi hasn't had a chance to play in a Habs jersey as of right now. We're not going to dig too much into that. But obviously, you know, the Subban for Weber deal is not something that's looking real good. I mean, obviously the Sergachev for Drouin deal right now, I don't think it's looking the best either. They need some quality players to play center ice. They did draft Jesperi Kotkaniemi, number 3 overall in the 2018 draft. It's still up in the air if he's going to be playing in the NHL this year or not. Personally, I think he should wait and continue to develop for at least one more year before he makes the NHL. That's just my opinion, but I guess time will tell on how the Habs really feel about him. Their decision here also might be based on what else they do during the offseason and who they can acquire to possibly play center ice between now and the start of NHL training camp. So I guess time will tell, but this there's also been some pushback on this report already, indicating that, you know what, maybe this is Max Pacioretty's new agent kind of putting some leaks out there to kind of speed up the process of either getting a contract or a trade in place, because obviously, as we know, Max Pacioretty at the NHL draft decided to change agents. He was with Pat Brisson of CAA, left that organization, and now he's represented by Alan Walsh. So obviously, I'm not really sure what came to be, what caused that change to happen. The only comment I really seen on it was Pat Brisson saying that him and Max both mutually agreed that it was for the best that he changed representation. Now, that could mean a number of things, and it's not really clear, so not really sure there. It was also reported at the draft that there was 2 different rumors floating around, some of them that actually was being covered on TV during the draft coverage, that he was really close to being traded to the LA Kings, but was denied the contract extension that they wanted to put in place to bring him over. There was also a rumor floating around that he was going to the Sharks. That never came to be. I'm not sure if there was really any truth to that, or if that was somebody jumping the gun on that report, or what that was. But either way, there does seem to be something to the fact that there was a trade in place for him to go to LA, but he would not agree to the contract extension that they wanted to have in place before making the deal. So even though Max Pacioretty does not have a no trade clause, he does not have any trade protection on his contract. In a lot of ways, he basically does, because as we know, teams are not going to want to trade for a player of his magnitude without having a contract extension in place. He's going into the final year of his deal, and most teams are going to want to make sure they can sign him to an extension if they're going to give up anything substantial to bring him into their organization. So if they can't work out a contract extension with him, they're not going to want to make that deal. So obviously that kind of leaves Max Pacioretty having a lot more power in this trade scenario than he normally would, even though he has no trade protection included in his contract. Obviously, like I said, like if the team inquires about trading for him and wants to discuss an extension and he won't agree to it, doesn't matter what Mark Bergevin thinks of the deal, if he's willing to do it or not, they're not going to do it on the other side if they don't get that verbal agreement on the contract extension. So even though this is kind of a unique scenario here where he does have more power than an average player with no trade protection built into his contract. So are they going to trade him right away? I guess it is possible. I guess we'll see here what happens with this report and how much truth there is to it. But the main teams linked to Pacioretty over the last number of months have included the LA Kings, the St. Louis Blues, the San Jose Sharks, and the Florida Panthers. Now, I keep hearing from a number of sources that he really would like to go to Florida. I mean, obviously, that's just something that's been reported. I can't say for sure that that's really how Max feels about it. But out of those 4 teams, you can certainly take the Blues out of the mix now. They've traded for O'Reilly. They've signed Patrick Maroon. They've signed Tyler Bozak. Like, their cap situation is pretty tight now. They still have Joel Edmondson to look after, who's an RFA. They're going to be doing good to keep what they have in place. They'd have to have significant money going out, and I just don't see that happening. So the Blues, you could say, pretty well, almost for sure, are out on obtaining a guy like a Pacioretty or a Jeff Skinner or any of these other wingers that are kind of hanging around here on the trade market. The other one that's out of the equation now is the LA Kings. They wouldn't sign Ilya Kovalchuk. They don't have a lot of cap space now, so I think it's safe to say they're out of the equation. So obviously that kind of leaves the Sharks as well as the Panthers. Now, if you look at the 2 organizations, personally, I think the Panthers have more to offer that the Habs would like. But of course, at the same time, like I said, Pacioretty does have some power here to be able to negotiate an extension to get a deal done. If you're the Montreal Canadiens, should you not want to have a center iceman coming back who can put up a decent amount of points? Wouldn't you want a center iceman coming back who can be first or second line, at least a second line, if not first line? Ideally, that would be what you would want. So having said that, I mean, if you look at the Sharks roster, you know, they're not going to be trading guys like Logan Couture. They're not going to be trading guys like Joe Thornton, Joe Pavelski. So obviously that leaves, who does that leave for them to possibly include? Well, they just signed Thomas Hertl to a new deal. He can play center. That's a possibility. Personally, I like Hurdle better as a winger, but he does play both positions and can be a decent center iceman. So really, of all the players the Sharks have that I think they could possibly consider moving who could play a top 2 center role, I think Hurdle's about the only one. So they do have some other prospects that kind of look decent to be who can play center, but really Montreal kind of stocked themselves up well in that center position at the 2018 draft here. Plus, I do have another prospect or two in their system as well. So I think they have enough young prospects who can play center. It's a matter now of developing them up into the main NHL club to be an effective long-term player for them. If they're going to want a center iceman coming back, they're going to want somebody who can play now, somebody who's already established. So could Hurdle be that guy? Personally, I think the better fit here would be the Florida Panthers myself. I know the Florida Panthers and Dale Talon are real high on center Nick Bjugstad. Whenever he's been asked before if Bjugstad's a player they'd consider trading, he's denied it, said how much of a fan he is of Bjugstad and he wants to keep him around. And I'm sure that's all true to an extent. But every GM can be tempted here with the right offer. If you put together a package of either Bjugstad, maybe youngster Henrik Borgstrom, maybe throw in Alex Petrovic. Obviously, the Habs need some D as well. I'm not sure Petrovic's going to get a ton of playing time in Florida this coming year. He might be the odd man out down there. So maybe you put together Petrovic with a Bjugstad, and maybe you get yourself a deal. You might have to throw in a draft pick or something, depending on how everybody feels about it. But really, I think the Panthers have some assets there between guys like Bjugstad, Borgstrom, Petrovic, some draft picks, whatnot, that they could probably be the team who would probably have the most to offer to acquire a guy like Pacioretty. Depending on what kind of contract Pacioretty ends up agreeing to, though, they may find it tricky with their cap situation. They may need to move out more than just Nick Bjugstad here in this deal. But if you take what Bjugstad's making along with Petrovic, maybe the two combined might come close to covering Pacioretty's salary. They could either look to move out another player either in that deal or in a separate deal or something if they need to kind of move things around. That's always a possibility as well. So personally, could he go to the Florida Panthers? I think it's a possibility. I would say Florida and San Jose would be my 2 leading contenders that would make the most sense for him to go to. But if you're a Habs fan and you're reading this report out of Montreal indicating that they want to trade him right away and they're not going to be offering him a contract extension, well, I'd like to know, what are your thoughts? Do you think there's much truth to this report? And what do you think about it if it is indeed true and they're going to be moving him sooner than later? Last but not least here, I want to touch quickly on the Minnesota Wild. Obviously, as we know, they're a team that's been mentioned in some trade rumors as well. We've talked about them off and on here over the last number of weeks. We talked about maybe would they consider trading Eric Staal. Obviously, Eric Staal come off a fantastic year. He's got a great contract. They might have some value to get a player back that could really help them longer term. Obviously, they have some other RFAs that need to be re-signed, like Jason Zucker and Matt Dumba have been mentioned in trade rumors as well. We've also speculated on Charlie Coyle as well as Nino Niederreiter. These are all players that I think General Manager Paul Fenton would consider moving for the right deal. But the reason I bring it up again today is we're approaching the RFA arbitration period here. Now, Matt Dumba and Jason Zucker both filed for arbitration. Those hearings are going to be coming up here very soon if they don't get deals in place before their hearings. Now, the hearings start July the 20th, so we're only 9 days away from these guys starting to be in having their hearing periods to determine what their new contracts are going to be. So if you take a look at the cap space of the Minnesota Wild, they have a little bit of over $9 million in cap space for next season available right now. So obviously, it's possible that depending on what these guys get for contracts, that they may be in too tight here and they may have to make a move whether they want to or not. Between Matt Dumba and Jason Zucker, Zucker's name has come up a lot more in trade rumors than Dumba has, at least for what I've come across myself. I don't really see them wanting to trade him. He's still fairly young. He's coming off a great season, so I don't see why they'd want to make that deal. However, like I mentioned before, players like Charlie Coyle, Nino Niederreiter, they've been underperforming. They've been there longer. Those types of players are still young enough that other teams might be interested in bringing them over to give them another shot with a fresh start, and maybe things might work out. So I think it's more likely that we're going to see guys like Niederreiter or Coyle be on the move to try to accommodate those contracts depending on where they end up. So once we see the first one of these two contracts announced from the Minnesota Wild, we'll have a good idea what's left for cap space. So for example, if they announce Matt Dumba's got a new contract, and let's say he's making $6.5, $7 million, somewhere around those lines, that's just a guess on my part. It could be a different number. We'll know what's left over for Zucker so that we can kind of determine if that's going to fit or what needs to move and make both of these work. My guess would be they'd want to keep both these players in the mix. So to make that happen, they're more likely going to have to move somebody. Just the question is, who is it going to be, where are they going to go, and what would the return be? The returns are likely going to have to be a combination of picks or prospects, because they won't be able to take very much money back in the deal if they're trying to dump some salary to make room for their RFA signings. So let me know down below, who do you think is the most likely that the Minnesota Wild move out here to try to accommodate these RFA signings to make sure they can keep Jason Zucker and Matt Dumba in the mix? Or do you see one of those guys actually possibly being traded instead of somebody else off the roster? Now, if you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there is plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.